Well, today on the show, I wanted to have Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, who's a personal friend who I think is defining some things with a spiritual lens that are happening in culture right now. I mean, the war in Israel, check. He has some perspective that you won't believe. Things that are happening in popular culture, check. Things that are about to happen in revival. And he's written this book. And this is what's interesting about his book, because you could write a book right now. It's not a book publishing season. Books aren't doing that great, but all of his books have done well, except for this one. The Dragon's Prophecy has hit #1 on all book charts all around the world for days. I mean, this has been an important book. And I think the reason why is because you and I are looking for spiritual perspective on world events. Are we living in the end times? Is this the time that has been prophesied about in the Bible? And also, who's leading the charge of explaining what's going on spiritually with Israel? What's going on with Palestine? Well, this book is going to help you so much, but this interview is going to help you even more because you're here with me right now. So I'm going to encourage you. This interview is going to take you into a place that maybe your perspective might just get the most hope you've had in months because of Rabbi Cahn and what he's sharing right now. Up next is Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. Okay, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, one of my favorite people in the world, and you are giving so much discernment and insight right now where the world's hungry. I just said it to you before we even started talking. Like, mainstream media is giving us nothing. They're just parroting each other's news, and we don't really get perspective. And then even a lot of church leaders, when they talk about what's happening in Israel and the mysteries right now that you're unveiling through even your new book, this Dragon Prophecy book is just, I mean, taken off, and it needs to. You're saying some things that no one's either brave enough to say or they don't have the discernment to say. And we need to hear them right here on the show, because when I saw the Game of Thrones advertisements all over with the dragon around, in Times Square and all over the Empire State's Building and all over England and and I was like, this has to be spiritual. And I actually like fantasy, like stories, but there was something beyond fantasy stories where there was a mark in time. And you wrote this book in response to what's going on right now in Israel and what's going on in culture. Let's talk about it. But welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Shawn. It's always great to be with you. And the thing is, I didn't plan on writing this book. I was actually planning on writing the sequel to The Return of the Gods, which is, and I will write that. But the Lord interrupted me by everything that was happening, and I'm praying out, Lord, do you want me to write a different book and about this? And then I'm praying, I see a dragon, like a red dragon. And I knew that it was from Revelation. And what you just said, when I started writing it, I had no idea. It was the beginning of 2024. It turns out that this year is the year of the dragon. There's a comet or a meteorite that comes by it comes by the world once every 70 years. This is the year. It's called the Mother of Dragons comet. Then in New York, all the dragon. I mean, and again and again. So this I didn't plan on it, but I knew this was what God wanted me to do. And this is the only book I've written where it literally, as I'm writing it, things are happening in the world that I'm writing, and I had to keep on updating it because it kept happening. Even after I finished writing it, it kept happening. And I've never shown with all the books. I mean, they're opening up mysteries that are now, that are unfolding now. But this is the Dragon's Prophecy, the only book where it opens up the realm also of end time prophecy, because things are happening so quick and so fast, accelerating, especially in this last period. Even while we talk right now about what's happening in Israel right now, it's happening. So this is not the book that I planned to write. This is the book that God planned for me to write, and he made sure I did.
Well, and take us out of kind of the natural realm, because some people who might be listening might be like, I'm sad for all the Palestinians who are dying, but I'm pro-Israel, but I don't know what to do about that in my heart. Or they might have more of like even a Christian secular perspective where they're not tuned into, but what is God doing right now over Israel? And why is Hezbollah attacking? And Bethlehem just got attacked. And just these crazy things are happening in our times. Like, I never thought I would be here. I thought coronavirus was the hardest thing we'd go through for a long time. And then we're going to swing back into normal. And it's like the most, talk about war, talk about cultural wars, talk about actual wars that could lead to World War III. And you talk about your book to kind of paint a picture for us right now of the season we're in.
Yeah, this exactly right. This is not natural. This is beyond natural. And the Bible gives us, the book is really kind of taking away the veil that behind the natural, behind the news is a whole nother realm. And that's really the realm that's determining things. And when you see that, everything makes sense. I'll give you an idea of the supernatural part of it. It was a Friday night, and I'm here in New Jersey, and I have a congregation. The congregation is Beth Israel, and I'm sharing on Friday night. I'm led to share about a mystery that's from Leviticus, and I share about this mystery ordains, and I'm not saying I know all these things, but ordained that there would be an attack on Israel. It would take Israel by surprise. It would happen in the year 2023 would happen in October of that year, would happen on a Saturday, a Sabbath day, would happen on a Hebrew holy day that went back to Leviticus, would happen on the first Saturday of October of 2023. The first Saturday of October 2023 turns out to be October 7th, which is exactly when it happened. I shared this mystery at Beth Israel, and the next morning it happened in Israel.
Oh,
and this mystery, this is what really began it, and this is one of the mysteries in the book, which may even enable us to know future events and when they're going to happen, because you're right, this is not natural. The whole situation is not natural. God is in control. And since I finished the manuscript, 3 other events happen according to this mystery. We're watching an ancient war. This is something that in Revelation, you have the dragon and the woman. You have and that's what I saw, the red dragon, and the woman is Israel. And so you have this war, and this war has been going on for 4,000 years. What happened on October 7th and what's happening now is just the latest part of it. We are watching the latest part of an ancient war that God speaks about and the Bible speaks about, and we are really living not only in end times but prophetic times.
I mean, that's hard for people to embrace in some ways, because I think we're so desensitized because it's all happening at once, but we're not looking with our spiritual lenses. So when you're looking at it and you see, again, Hezbollah's got activated, Israel's at a place where they're either going to be destroyed or God's going to come through. Either the whole Middle East is going to come and rise up, or they're going to rise up. And in some ways, this is a proxy war for America. I mean, this is like Israel fighting for the West. And so talk to us about spiritually what you're seeing in this.
Yeah, there's so much. This relates to Revelation, relates to Ezekiel, it relates to everything the Bible said of the end times. There is the war I alluded to is, the Bible says that there is a real entity that we call Satan. It's from Hebrew, Satan. And this entity exists to destroy the purposes of God and stop the purpose of God. Well, on the other hand, God creates another entity, Israel, or the Jewish people, and they exist for the opposite. They exist to bring forth the purposes of God, the Bible, the Word, Messiah, the kingdom. So what's going to happen? There's going to be a war between the two, And so if you look at human history, I mean, and up to this, and it's like exploded in this last period. But what we've been watching, you'd expect the Jewish people would be the most persecuted people, most hated people, the most warred against people, the most hunted down people, because that's actually what it says in Revelation. The dragon hunted or persecuted the woman. So we're watching this thing, and you can never explain it rationally, because in every generation it happens, and the reasons are always different. The communists hated the Jews because they said they were capitalists. The capitalists said they were communists. It doesn't matter what it is. It could, you cannot explain Hitler and the Third Reich naturally. There's no rational thing. It is demonic, but the Bible does explain it. And then Hitler goes, and now we're dealing with this every generation, So this is kind of, the Bible speaks about the end times, and it says the world is going to be a world in which you'll know you're in the end times when Israel has come back into it. And also when all the nations are going to be obsessed with this little New Jersey size land, and that they're going to rage against. It makes no sense. They're going to rage against it. This is all part of it. It's kind of all leading to the final stage. But we're watching, really, I could say, Shawn, I've watched, of course, world events as you have, and prophecy. I've never seen things accelerate so fast in so many fronts prophetically as this past period that we're still in right now.
Well, we're coming into probably one of the most important elections. People always say that, but this seems to be one of the most important elections in America's history, at least modern history, because of all that's at stake. And I'm not asking you to talk about the candidates at all, but talk about the political season we're in, geopolitically worldwide, but also in America right now. We're in this sense of, like, if we are having end time events happen right now, what are we doing? Like, how do we actually, like, vote, not just with our conscience, but with our spirit?
We're, and this goes with all this, and it's speaking of the end times, it's Israel on one side, but it's also a great falling away on the other. And we're watching both happen. I mean, simultaneously. And by the way, also in the vision of the Revelation, the dragon wars against Israel, but also against the rest of her children who are Christians. They're talking about those who follow Messiah. So we'd expect it. So we talk about culture war. It's not, so you're watching, a physical war happening in the Middle East regarding Israel's existence. And we're watching a spiritual war take place in the West and much of culture in America. This election, certainly, I don't believe it's ever been so diametrically opposed. We have so radical a stand, one regarding, for instance, life, regarding, religious freedom, freedom of speech, regarding gender. It's never been so radical. I mean, just objectively on one side, and you have another side which is kind of trying to hold the fort. You have the conservatives trying to hold the fort. Christians are trying to hold the fort. And so it really tells you where we are. Number one, so we're watching two gigantic wars. And by the way, you said vote. I do encourage everybody who's watching. I'm sure you do too. But vote, number one, because you do make a difference. Number two, prayer is the most important. Without revival, America is lost. I've been, I've been warning about this. The Lord has led me to write from the Harbinger on. We are in a very dangerous position where we are heading for judgment. If we don't turn back to God, we are racing away. So we're really watching the two major strands of the end times. One is Israel, and the other is the falling away and everything that comes because of it. We're watching both of them, and they're both accelerating. Shawn, I don't know how you felt like after the thing happened, after October 7th. It wasn't just there. All over the world was this outbreak of this rage against Israel, which we have never seen to that degree. That scale has never been so widespread. And it wasn't just the Islamic world. It was the Western world and America and Harvard. And when they made studies, they found that the young people were leading it and are more against Israel than, and more for Hamas. And this is the future, except for revival. That's the future. So this really, I could say every single thing is lining up with that. We do have to pray for America. I pray for that. I pray for revival all the time. I try to work for revival. We got to do that. But we also have to realize that if we do not, the way the culture is going, it's racing away from God.
Well, and I think of, the movies that came out last year, like Jesus Revolution with Kelsey Grammer, about the last big revival we had, at least in America, that actually seemed to, I've read a statistic that 80% of ministry leaders in churches today were saved in that revival period of time, even if it wasn't directly through the revival, in about a 6 or 7 year period. And culture was like a dress rehearsal for where we're at right now. Culture was going downhill. You had, people were fighting against America. You had an anti-Semitism that was coming out. So there was a dress rehearsal for similar issues we're in now, but the issues we're in now feel like they actually could collapse empires, or they could collapse, or if we don't have the right stand with Israel, that something dire could be at stake, and these kinds of. So talk a little bit about some more of what God showed you that you've written in this book, because I feel like I believe revival is a key to, and I think we're set up for it, even with all the exposures that are happening in entertainment and politics, everything from back when Epstein Island was exposed to current pastors who are going through some exposures that is actually clearing way for something that's, I think, even more pure to emerge. And especially with some of the, we just read about 2 weeks ago, there was a college football team from a secular college baptizing kids in their local fountains because God was on the move. So there is these organic moves that are, from Asbury right at the same time as Jesus Revolution to now there's on college campuses all across America, there's been a move of God that's been not even reported about, but it's been, thousands of students coming to the Lord at the same secularized colleges that are having the pro-Hamas, rallies. It's just wild to watch. So talk about that, because I think there is hope. There's a lot of hope, and you're a hope giver. You always give us so much hope.
I have, and I appreciate. Yeah, and at the end of every book, there's hope. And actually, the last part of the Dragon's Prophecy is that what do we do? How do we overcome with all that's coming and all that we're dealing with? There are we on the winning side? And we are, But this is the long-term view, But we are. A few things, it's kind of like it's amazing as you're talking, because it's kind of like there's the physical side and the spiritual side, and in many ways, Israel on one hand, Israel represents this physical. It's a physical nation, and it's against the world. The world's turning against Israel. Darkness, but they're fighting. But on the other side, you have the spiritual, and actually in the Bible, it's a spiritual Israel. We are children of Israel if you are born again. And so now you're watching like you have the darkness of the culture, but then you have the light shining. And the thing is that we are to shine. It says that in the dark, it says in the end, it says those who are righteous, who lead many, will shine like the stars, And of course, you never shine as greatly until there's darkness around you. Yeah. So, so there's it's like everything at once, on one hand, we look at what's happening. And again, I'm seeing, as we're talking, I'm just seeing this double picture, these two realms, these two dimensions, because on one hand, you got, again, all this demonic things against Israel, the whole world against Israel in so many ways. And yet this is all part of prophecy. And this is leading to the kingdom. This is leading to Messiah. On the other hand, you have the church, or you have God's people, and you have culture, and you have the rest of the world, and you have this kind of encroaching darkness in the culture. But it's also a glorious time. The book of Acts did not exist in a Christian culture. It existed in an anti-Christian culture.
That's so good.
And so if we want the book of Acts, listen, these are the ingredients. So it's radical on both sides. And the thing is that I believe it's like there's a mystery that everything is returning to where it was at the beginning of the age. At the beginning of the age, you had an Israel in the world, so you got it back. You had Jewish people in Jerusalem, they are back. So you also had the church and Israel tighter than they've ever been. It's coming back. You also had the world going back. You have the world going back to where it was, which was pagan, anti-Christian world culture. And yet you have the book of Acts. So I believe we have to get back to that, which is the book of Acts. But that's radical. It is countercultural. It is revolutionary. It's not status quo. It's kind of like the parallel, again, the spiritual parallel of what Israel is to the world doesn't fit in. So we are increasingly in the end times in the spirit.
Wow. No, that is so encouraging, because the book of Acts, when there was unity and there was love and there was power demonstrations and there was an antidote. I mean, Jesus literally became the antidote for every problem. And I love that you're saying this, because there is so much hope. And I think every time the darkness is increasing, you see those memes where it's like, my parents in their 30s, they were thinking about buying a house. Me in my 30s, I've lived through the 7th book of Revelation. It's like people with it, like the crazy hair. I don't know if you've seen those memes, but people who are young, especially, they feel like, man, I'm just living through so much. And they may not think of that with excitement or with anticipation for Jesus. And they may think of it more as like, why us? Why do we have to live through this? But it's so beautiful, because you are always bringing this place of like, but when revival comes and when God is here and when his people are activated, it's so different than just the bad temperature that's in the house, or outside.
Yeah. And it's like this. I think there's things where you're triggering these things, because when I think about, you think about the Jesus revolution and the culture and all those things. Oh, by the way, here's the other thing. As the culture gets darker, the believers who shine get more radical. Each generation has got to get more radical, so that's another thing. If you go back, and look at America and look over the past, everybody said they were Christian, but you didn't see so much Christians standing out so radically as you do to the culture now. So that's the other side, which again is all heading to the book of Acts. They were radical and they stood out. But the other thing that struck me as you're talking is, when I think of the Jesus revolution and that period, I also think of there was a revival of end time prophecy. Because before this, there was, the church was, think about this too. At the beginning of the age, by the way, the book of Acts, they were into end time prophecy. They were into the coming of the Lord. And then when the church got kind of settled status quo and organized and kingdom, they said, hey, we have it pretty good. We don't need the Lord to come right now. And they started getting away from that. Hey, we're the kingdom and we don't need, we don't really need all that. We don't have to get into that. Israel's finished, but the revival that we're talking about involved end time prophecy. In fact, this is another connection that, the Jesus movement begins. I mean, it begins, with Haight-Ashbury, and California, and begins, and you had the Summer of Love and all that, and from the Summer of Love you start having the Jesus movement coming out of that. The Summer of Love began in June of 1967. What else happened? In June of 1967, the soldiers of Israel entered the gates of Jerusalem.
Wow.
So think about that. Now think about that. And not the same year, same month. And it was at the beginning, they entered the gates. Now think about this, because when you look at the book of Acts, you had Jerusalem, you had Jewish people in Jerusalem, and you had the Spirit. Well, you haven't had any of that. So everything's going back to where it was. And so that happened just before. And so people got saved. And by the way, more Jewish people got saved in that revival to this day from that than any other time since the book of Acts. Yeah. Well, I'm from that too. I picked up a book when I was in high school, and I was an atheist, and it was The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey.
Oh, wow. That's a great book.
Which is all part of this, and so there's a real connection going on. We're like in now another stage, but there's a real connection between Israel and the prophetic events and this and end time prophecy. And I remember back then, everybody's end time prophecy, it's gonna end by 1980. Everybody has their thing, and that's not the way it goes. It never goes the way we think, But we are witnessing, for instance, things like persecution. That's come. The marginalization of believers. That's come. And things that we could not even have imagined back then. But one of the things is, one of the things I open up in the book is Ezekiel. One of the prophecies of end times that has really moved forward. Ezekiel says that in the last days, there'll be an alliance of nations that will come against Israel and will invade. And this is last days, because he says, and it'll happen in the end times, in the latter days. And the thing is that he identifies the nations, and we can identify a number of them. And the amazing thing is, he says that they're gonna take part in an invasion of Israel. Now that's yet to come, but it may be the next great big prophetic event. But the thing is that they've never done that until this year, because behind October 7th were the nations of Ezekiel that he mentioned. That he mentions Cush or Sudan, they were behind Hamas. He mentions Put or Libya, they were behind it. Wow. He mentions Turkey, they were behind it. And he mentions Iran. Iran was every single, all these ones, and that has never been ever until this year. And the other thing is he says that Iran is going to attack Israel. Well, that's part of it, but it's still to come. But Iran has never attacked Israel directly, ever, until this spring, when they sent all those missiles to Israel and the world was on edge. So we are crossing prophetic lines gigantically. And the other thing is that you said at the beginning, you can't understand. I mean, people try to just look at the news without this, having God's perspective. The spiritual realm is behind the physical realm. And one of the things about it is one of the things I speak about when I speak about the end of days in the book is there's something called the Sarparos. The Sarparos is an entity mentioned in the Bible in Hebrew that exists to oppose Israel, destroy Israel, stop the purpose of God for Israel. Sarparos, demonic entity. What does it mean? Sar means ruler or leader or general. Paras means the nation of Iran. So here you've got this mystery from the Bible, an entity that exists to destroy Israel, and you've got Iran, that is the nation that more than any nation on earth exists to destroy Israel. And people are trying to understand it. We can't understand Iran. Yes, you can. There is an entity behind it that is exactly what the Bible says, and that is why they are behind Hezbollah right now. The news right now, behind Hezbollah is Iran. Behind Iran is the Sarparas. Behind October 7th was Gaza. And behind that was Hamas. Behind Hamas was Iran, the Sarparas, and the
this is all trackable. This is all completely true, and it's interesting that Iran was almost bankrupt when Trump was in office, and they got such an infusion of wealth after that, which also speaks of where we're at, that there was people who were willing to go to bed with Satan, so to speak, to be able to get this wealth transferred in that enabled them to be able to fund this war. And the bigger thing that I think is interesting, a lot of people don't know, is that there's been reports that over 1 million Iranians have just gotten saved over the last 3 months.
Yes.
That's a crazy number. Like, there's such an underground church there that has, especially with Armenians and others that have been leading this. It's so interesting to me that there's this in the middle of the Middle East, and one of the places of the most crisis, there's a great light of Jesus. Yeah, I think that that's very significant in the midst of what we're talking about. Well, Rabbi Cahn, I think looking at you, I know why this book has risen to the top of the charts of all books sold worldwide right now, because people are looking for the spiritual perspective, and you so give it so beautifully every single time you write, you speak, you share. All of us, we just come alive. Like, we just come into a place of like, that's it. I didn't have words for it. I didn't have the language, and you're giving us the language, and it's creating a roadmap for people to have faith. And so I want to just commend you and tell you, like, we need you. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad. As a Jewish man, we're so grateful for you. As a rabbi, we're so grateful. But as a Christian brother, we're so grateful that you exist. And for such a time as this. So thank you. I know everybody's going to want to get this book. Is there a best way besides Amazon that you encourage?
Literally. Yeah. Thank you, Shawn. And by the way, likewise, Becky, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. By the way, you have a unique spirit, just where you're seeking the heart of God, and you're seeking people to be encouraged by the heart of God. And also, it's also prophetic at the same moment. It's for this hour. The book is, you can't miss it. It looks like this. You can't miss the cover. That's the dragon I saw. But literally, the Dragon's Prophecy is everywhere. You can get it on Amazon, get it right on now online. It's also in Walmart and Target and all those places.
That's everywhere. I've seen it everywhere. I've been to Target. I've been to Barnes and Nobles. It's there on the shelves. Yeah. So yeah, it's like they're not going to miss it.
Yeah, I'm hoping people get it, not just for themselves, for people in their lives who need to be waking up, wake to know what's happening, know what's coming, and to be ready. Again, the last whole part is how to be ready and how to overcome, because we are called. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and that's that we do win, and so that's what about it. But it's literally everywhere, and for believers and also non-believers who don't believe and they don't realize how real God is.
Well, we're so excited about this, but we're also excited about Return of the Gods Part 2. I can't wait. I cannot wait. So we will be with you again and interview you again on that one. But Thank you so much for providing an atmosphere for this conversation, because we needed to have it.
Thank you, Shawn. It's a blessing.